Well, folks, it was a morbid inevitability, particularly as his health had taken a dire turn in recent years. As Jim Steranko pointed out on Twitter, he actually died some time ago. Folks, I can barely say it. Stan Lee is gone. Now, it's impossible to overstate the enduring impact on pop culture this single human being boasted. The mere creation of Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, the X-Men, and a million others, never mind my personal favorite, Daredevil, but his erstwhile exploits almost overshadow the forward thinker Stan Lee was in his later life. And while many in memoriams will be cut over the next 24 hours, exhaustively itemizing his high points and low points, few indeed will discuss Stan Lee's lesser-known but infinitely more enduring accomplishments. So, in honor of our fallen Generalissimo, rather than craft the 15 billionth he made Spidey sob fest, let us discuss some of the oft-ignored accomplishments of Stan Lee, for without this one man, the world would truly be a duller place. So let's start out with something you doubtless see literally every day of your life. Merchandising! Yes, George Lucas arguably birthed the modern action figure craze with the first Star Wars set. He recognized the potential of sole merchandising rights and birthed a cottage industry thereby. We all know that, and it's gnarly. But Stan Lee was basically Lucas 2 decades earlier, recognizing comics' commercial potential as a merchandising concern and exploiting it like a Somali sweatshop worker with everything from buttons to Halloween costumes to a full-blown Marvel music album before Star Wars was even a forethought.
And how come I don't get my name plastered all over the mags like you do?
Because I can't spell it, that's why.
Well, as long as you've got a good reason.
Hey, what's all that commotion out there, Sol?
Why, it's Shy Steve Ditko. He heard you're making a record and he's got mic fright. Whoops, there he goes.
Out the window again? You know, I'm beginning to think he is Spider-Man.
You mean he isn't?
You like your Cap shirt, your Hulk fists, your action figures, hell, even your Spider-Man PS4 video game from a little over a month ago? Fall to your knees and thanks Stan Lee. Or how's about his stance on censorship? Now, you've heard the tale in every tongue by now, so I won't bore you with the details. To turn a long yarn into a pube, comics got a bit racy in the 40s. By the 50s, the threat of government-mandated death squads led to the creation of the self-censorship body, the Comics Code Authority. We all know this, and of course, there's a fair bit of revisionism thrown in to boot. Well, you might also know that Stan Lee fired the first shots in what would ultimately lead to the obliteration of said censorship.
I had received a letter from the government, from the Office of Health, Education, and Welfare. They thought it would really be beneficial if I would get a story about the dangers of drug addiction and feature it in one of our top books. Rejected. We could not put the seal of approval on those issues. I said, why? They said, according to the code, you're not allowed to mention drugs.
At an impasse, Lee turned to his publisher, Martin Goodman, for support.
I said, Martin, I want to do these books anyway, so we won't have the seal of approval. I was so proud of him. He backed me to the hilt.
Or hey, how's about something many don't even consider an accomplishment? Epic Comics. Now, today, the Epic imprint is a happy footnote, but in retrospect, while it may not have enjoyed widespread commercial appeal at the time, it would ultimately prove to be a movement of major importance. The concept, as originally conceived by Jim Shooter and Al Milgrom, was simple. Heavy metal magazine with its mature themes, sincere storytelling, glossy page stock, graphic novel structure, and wealth of European comic artists was in all likelihood the future of American comics. Stan Lee himself, in fact, had been pushing for precisely that at Marvel for some time, and so Epic Illustrated was launched in defiance of the censorious Comics Code Authority. The list of titles is dizzying, from high science fiction like Alien Legion and Dreadstar to adaptations of Clive Barker's Hellraiser comics, actually, and Nightbreed, in fact. And, of course, Frank Miller's final word on Daredevil's Red Flame, the gorgeous, watercolored Elektra Assassin. The imprint presaged the existence of DC's Vertigo line by almost a decade, but perhaps more importantly to the weeaboos on the interwebs, you know, the popular wisdom that dictates it was Dark Horse Comics that brought anime and manga to Western comic stores via their translations of Ghost in the Shell and, of course, the immortal Akira? Well, the first volumes of Akira were translated into English, and yes, even colored, not by Dark Horse, but by Epic Comics. Without said timely translation, it's a mortal certainty Akira never would have won a Harvey Award in the 80s in the West, and without that act of additional legitimacy, the success of which incentivized the 1988 anime adaptation and its English translation, who the hell knows if the entire late 80s anime revolution would have existed at all? You're welcome, weebs! But Stan's most enduring contribution to the epic line was far and away his collaboration with French comics legend Mobius, a transatlantic mishmash of disparate styles entitled Silver Surfer Parable, a kind of successor to Stan's final work with Jack Kirby's Silver Surfer: The Ultimate Cosmic Experience, which is widely regarded as Marvel's very first graphic novel, by the by. The story behind Silver Surfer Parable is nearly as enthralling itself, with Stan Lee set to meet Mobius for the first time, having been a fan of his work for ages, learning of his collaborations in Hollywood and Heavy Metal magazine. Stan Lee was all but crapping his adult diapers at the prospect, only to finally meet Mobius and learn that he was at least 3 times as nervous to meet the great Stan Lee. And so, this comic is almost more an exercise in mutual respect, of divergent styles coming to the middle to craft one of the finest sci-fi superhero comics of the 1980s, and far and away, one of the finest comics Marvel has ever published. Stan Lee upped his game as a writer, cultivating a more cinematic approach appropriate to the period, while Mobius molded his more detailed, crosshatch-laden style to the action-oriented approach of American comics, focusing more on gesture and movement than rendering every grain of concrete. It's not a stretch to say it's a masterpiece. It's certainly one of the reasons Silver Surfer remains among my favorite comic characters, and it's something you should absolutely read in the wake of Stan's passing, not to mention Mobius' death just a few years before that. In fact, in the wake of this terrible news, I found myself flipping through pages of Stan's Surfer comics more than anything, of which he was famously quite proud, as the existential musings contained therein speak at least partially to my immeasurable grief. Here lies a man who mythologized our childhood. From you to me, Smilin' Stan, comics won't be the same without ya. Excelsior!